Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Part 172 based on novel. So let's start. Wasn't that right? Yang Xiaoxia's martial soul was a radiant phoenix and all his abilities were based on the element of light, while the demoplane was inhabited by undead creatures. Yang Xiaoxia and Yi Gai felt the most uncomfortable. If Yi Gai hadn't already tried and realized that killing these undead creatures didn't improve her cultivation, she would probably have charged around to slaughter some undead. Yang Xiaoxia directly admitted it, and said, "Yes. I truly don't like the feeling of this place. You have to tell me how you got this demoplane when we go back. I believe not even an ultimate Doluo can possibly possess a place like this. Yes. One of my teachers left this place for me. Huiyuhao needed to keep this secret very strictly before, but as he became stronger, he didn't need to keep it so excessively anymore. After all, he increasingly required this ability, just as he had told Elder Xian without hesitation back then about how he had a necromancer martial soul. Huiyuhao retreated from within the black door, and began to chant as the spectral gate closed. Everything within the tent returned to normal. Huiyuhao's plan wasn't complicated. He was to go undercover in the Sun Moon Empire's army camp, and his next step was to find some way to locate where Tang Yue was staying. Then, he would attempt to get closer to her and figure out what was happening there. Afterwards, he would find a suitable opportunity to make a move and rescue her. Huiyuhao had already planned how he was to escape. He would have no choice but to draw upon his abilities as a necromancer when that happened. They only had a chance to escape if he could create sufficient chaos. Huiyuhao and the others had already conveyed their plans to the Heavenly Soul Empire before they departed. The Heavenly Soul Empire would feint an attack right before Huiyuhao and the others would make their move, but a feint attack would be all. The attack was meant to attract their enemies' attention so that they could maneuver and complete their mission better. The Heavenly Soul Empire was very supportive of their plan, and that was especially so after finding out that Elder Song had defeated and killed an evil titled Doluo. Huiyuhao had also promised that he would try his best to disrupt and destroy things within the Sun Moon Empire's camp. Huiyuhao was the only successful product from the Ultimate Soldier plan, and he was best at concealing himself, assassinations, and carrying out missions. Creating some trouble inside the Sun Moon Empire's camp wouldn't be difficult at all. He began to contemplate his plan as he sat down with his legs crossed, and he tried all he could to make sure that his plan was complete. Huiyuhao's strength would be very inadequate if he was by himself, but he had a very good helper now. The sky was becoming brighter outside, and the break of dawn meant a new day was about to begin. Huiyuhao exited the tent and stared at the blue skies as he gazed far into the east while he quietly absorbed the thread of purple energy that rose there. It didn't take long before Nangong Wan walked briskly towards him. Their eyes met for a moment, and Nangong Wan smiled as he walked over and said, "Up so early, masquerade? Come, let's go grab something to eat." Nangong Wan didn't rest either the previous night. He was even more worried than Huiyuhao himself that his identity would be revealed, because he would be in deep trouble if Huiyuhao's identity was discovered. When that happened, life and death wasn't the problem, because he would rather die than be alive. Nangong Wan was too aware of the Holy Ghost Church's methods. All right. Huiyuhao didn't waste words. They proceeded towards the canteen under Nangong Wan's guidance. Nangong Wan projected his voice with his mind as they walked, and he introduced the places where they walked by. Nangong Wan was very useful as a spy because Huiyuhao couldn't use spiritual detection to investigate the camp directly. This was especially so because they were inside the army camp's core section, and there were many powerful evil soul masters wherever they went. They were going towards where the Soul Engineer legions were camped, and it was imperative for Huiyuhao to know where they ate, where they showered, where they typically exercised or moved around in the day, and which areas were forbidden or the most dangerous. He could only make sure that his plan was complete with sufficient intelligence. The Holy Lady typically has her breakfast very early in the day, and it should be about now. We should go see her. Nangong Wan passed a message to Huiyuhao. Huiyuhao answered with his mind without altering his expression. Avoid interacting with other people to keep from exposing us. Nangong Wan replied, that won't be much of a problem. Us evil soul masters have our own personalities, and I'm better with people, so I'm more acquainted and friendly with many evil soul masters. But you don't interact much with them, so even if you don't say a word, they won't say anything to you even if you run into them. All right. They arrived in front of an enormous tent as they spoke. Typical soldiers and even officers got their meals from the army cooks before they went back to have them in their own mess. Only high-level army officials had their own canteen spots, while evil soul masters naturally had better treatment. The Soul Engineer legions and high-level army officials were also unwilling to eat with evil soul masters, so even though their canteen wasn't big, it was almost exclusively for evil soul masters to eat. There were some evil soul masters who were here to eat even though it was still early. They bowed respectfully when they saw Hui Yuhao and Nangong Wan. Status differences were very clear within an organization like the Holy Ghost Church, and strength was status. If those who were weaker dared to offend those who were stronger, nobody would speak out for the perpetrator even if he was killed. There were more than 10 tables in the dining tent, and each table could seat about 6 people. Hui Yuhao's body quivered once he entered the tent, and his eyes were almost guided by his consciousness as he immediately saw Tang San, who was eating at the innermost table. Tang San was wearing a long black dress with bright blue flowery patterns on the edges. This clearly showed that her status was different from the others, since most individuals in the Holy Ghost Church only had a pure black cloak. Elders like Nangong Wan and the Masquerade Dolor had silver patterns at the edges of their robes, and Nangong Wan had told Hui Yuhao that people from the worship halls had golden patterns. The supreme leader that Hui Yuhao had seen before had golden patterns all over his robe, and it appeared most luxurious and pretty. Hui Yuhao and Nangong Wan exchanged a look, and Nangong Wan took him all the way inside until they were in front of Tang San's table as Nangong Wan said respectfully, "Holy Lady." Tang San looked up at them as she nodded with a plain look in her eyes. She didn't say anything, however. Hui Yuhao's emotions rippled faintly when he saw her eyes. Tang San's eyes were extremely cold, as if there weren't any emotions in them at all, and her pupils were completely grey. Hui Yuhao didn't detect any kind of life from her body. Hui Yuhao had interrogated the delicate silk immortal about Tang San's situation before. Yu had told him that Tang San was under an evil spell, and she was badly poisoned. Her delicate silk immortal pill could dispel the toxins in Tang San's body. At least, her pill could gradually remove and suppress those toxins. However, she still needed the Blue Silver Emperor to awaken her martial soul's life energy. Otherwise, her life energy would flow away together with those evil toxins, and she would ultimately die. The dishes in front of Tang San were very simple, but they looked very exquisite. There were evil soul masters at the other tables, but not a single one dared to sit at her table, as if this table was exclusively prepared for her. Nangong Wan and Hui Yuhao walked to another table and sat down as they got their breakfast. Breakfast was very sumptuous and was prepared with ingredients that were very nutritious and beneficial for evil soul masters. Only evil soul masters had such special treatment. Hui Yuhao ate as he quietly felt the changes in Tang San's aura. Her life energy was undulating very weakly, as if her entire being no longer had any life energy. However, Hui Yuhao could feel an intense sense of alarm from her as she sat there, as if there was an enormous beast hidden within her body. Hui Yuhao could feel his heart tie up into knots as he ate his breakfast in silence. He could still remember when he first met teacher Xiao Ya, and how lively and cheerful she was. She was with his eldest senior brother back then, and they were like a couple made in heaven. She made the decision and allowed him to join the Tang sect, and then she used the Tang sect's only spot to let him enter Shrek Academy. It could be said that Tang San and Bei Bei had given him a new life, and Hui Yuhao had always kept this favor deep within his heart. Hui Yuhao's pain and agony as he witnessed Tang San's current situation wasn't difficult to imagine. He truly didn't know how Bei Bei would react if he saw her like this. Hui Yuhao made a silent vow to himself. Teacher Xiao Ya, we will definitely save you from this place no matter what. We have to help you return to normal. Just as Hui Yuhao's emotions were riling up, a voice suddenly rang out. Second brother, old 7, You guys are early today. Old Seven naturally referred to the masquerade Dolor, while second brother referred to Nangong Wan. Hu Hao immediately withdrew his emotions as he raised his head. However, his emotions quivered vigorously for a moment when he saw who had come. The person who was speaking to them was the one who was adept with soul tools in the Holy Ghost Church, the third elder that Hu Hao harbored a deep hatred for. Back then, those three elders had forced him to burn his spiritual sea before Wang Chioa sacrificed herself to save him. It could be said that Chioa died at the hands of the third elder and the fourth elder. Hu Hao didn't expect to run into this person so quickly. However, he had long known that he was here because of what Nangong Wan had described to him, so he did have some mental preparation. He quickly returned to normal after his emotions rippled a little. Nangong Wan said appropriately, "We're not early. It's just that we didn't sleep much last night. Someone from the Heavenly Soul Empire came over and was conducting surveillance high up in the sky. We went up to take a look, and chased them all the way back to the Heavenly Soul Empire's side. I think we're in a bit of trouble, Old Three. We have discovered people from Shrek Academy, and we've heard from the Supreme Leader that the Dean of Shrek Academy's Martial Soul Department, the Radiant Phoenix Dolor, Yang Shaosha is here." Yang Shaosha? The third elder immediately shifted his attention to Nangong Wan as he said confusedly, "Yang Shaosha? Was he the dragon god Dolor, Mu Yen's disciple back then? He should be a transcendent Dolor by now." Nangong Wan nodded and said, "That isn't all. If I remember correctly, he is also the next heir of Shrek Academy's Sea Gods Pavilion." The third elder sat down beside Nangong Wan and grunted coldly as he said, "Let him come. After all, our battle with Shrek Academy is a matter of when, not if. We have more than 10,000 soldiers in our great army, and we also have the Sun Moon Empire's 5 great soul engineer legions, while the Supreme Leader is holding down the fort in person. Even if all of Shrek Academy's elites were here, their effectiveness on a battlefield such as this one would be very limited." Nangong Wan chuckled and said, "That sounds about right. Hurry up and eat." The third elder looked up at Hu Hao, who was beside Nangong Wan, and asked, "Old Seven, I heard you've chased your 2 mistresses away." Hu Hao's expression darkened as he replied, "Third brother, don't pick on my scabs. The Supreme Leader scolded me yesterday, so how can I not change? If you're interested, those 2 girls can belong to you. I'm just afraid that you can't take it." The third elder laughed and said, "Nonsense. You know I don't like such things." Hu Hao laughed coldly and said, "How can that be? Why do I remember that you imprisoned a lady back then? It's not that you don't like such things, but that you are very focused in your love, ha ha ha." The third elder blushed as he said suspiciously, "How did you know that?" Hu Hao was naturally referring to the third elder imprisoning Nan Shui, which not even Nangong Wan knew about. Hu Hao said plainly, "As long as you've done something, somebody will know. You're already so old, third brother, so why are you still embarrassed? All right, I've had my fill. I'm going back, and you can continue chatting with second brother. I didn't sleep well last night, so I'm going back to cultivate so that the Supreme Leader can't say that I've been lazy." Hu Hao stood up after his speech and walked out. He didn't want to say any more, as he was bound to say something wrong if he did. It was better to minimize any interaction with these evil soul masters. The third elder said unhappily to Nangong Wan, "Second brother, why does Old Seven seem so weird today?" Nangong Wan laughed and replied, "That's probably because he isn't in such a good mood after the Supreme Leader chided him last night. But you know what's up with Old Seven, it's very difficult for him to improve with that martial soul of his." Hu Hao saw that Tang San had also stood up to walk out before he left the canteen, and an idea occurred to him as he slowed his steps. Tang San maintained a steady pace as she walked towards her tent after leaving the canteen. The evil soul masters didn't reside very far from the canteen. Hu Hao naturally shared a path with her, and he pretended to run into her as he slowed and said respectfully, "Holy Lady." "Yes," Tang San acknowledged as she walked across his path, expressionless. She didn't pay any attention to him at all. Hu Hao made a quick judgment in his mind. From Tang San's current situation, Her mind had to be affected by some kind of restriction or spell, and her martial soul had been infected by evil toxins. However, those evil toxins were catalyzing her growth and improvement, and from the aura that she was giving off, she should be an 8-ringed soul de lure. Evil soul masters cultivate really quickly. Back then, teacher Xiao Wei was still quite some distance away from eldest senior brother's cultivation, but she has surpassed him now. Hui Yuhao watched Tang Wei disappear into her tent before he returned to his own. Today's result is good. At least, I've seen Tang Wei, and that proves Nangong Wan's intel is accurate. Now, I have to figure out how to take her away. Hui Yuhao crossed his legs and began to meditate as he returned to his room, but his brain began to spin rapidly. How can I take teacher Xiao Wei away safely? Furthermore, I have to ensure that we don't sustain any injuries or losses. The Sun Moon Empire's camp was rather peaceful because there were no battles, and only the occasional sounds of training soldiers could be heard from time to time. This area where the evil soul masters resided was separated from the rest, and there were no soldiers patrolling this area, so there wasn't much noise. A day quickly passed. Hui Yuhao didn't wait for Nangong Wan to arrive at midday as he went ahead to the canteen to eat. He deliberately went ahead early to avoid the powerful evil soul masters before he returned to his tent to continue cultivating. From the other evil soul master's perspective, the seventh elder began to put in effort after the supreme leader had scolded him, so nobody suspected him. Darkness befell the heavens as the sky became completely dark before Hui Yuhao opened his eyes in his tent. The tent was very dim, but Hui Yuhao's eyes were bright like the stars in the night sky. It's time to test the waters. A thread of white light emerged from Hui Yuhao's eyes, and his entire body seemed to quiver as the light around him contorted a little. A figure appeared soundlessly in front of him. This figure seemed small and cute, and it was about as large as an infant, but it looked identical to Hui Yuhao. The light became increasingly material, like it was a real tiny person. This was Hui Yuhao's spiritual avatar, that he had conjured with his concrete material spiritual power. Hui Yuhao had created a spiritual soul core, so his spiritual avatar was much stronger than before. His spiritual avatar could use some of Hui Yuhao's soul skills, and people couldn't even tell that his avatar was made from energy just by looking with their eyes. The minute Hui Yuhao glanced at his original body before he vanished into the air with a flash. Yes, that was imitation. Hui Yuhao's spiritual avatar could only use his spirit eye soul skills. However, using a soul skill would consume part of his spiritual avatar's origin energy, and once his avatar's origin energy was depleted, it would crumble. Hui Yuhao's spiritual avatar left the tent under the cover of imitation, and soundlessly approached Tang Wei's tent. Hui Yuhao didn't go inside once he arrived outside Tang Wei's tent. Who knew whether Tang Wei had a spiritual barrier around her? Hui Yuhao would reveal his original body if he was discovered, and everything that he had discovered before would go to waste. Hui Yuhao circled around Tang Wei's tent before he circled another time around a large golden tent not far from there before he snapped further away. He wouldn't go into a tent to investigate things right now, because he could be easily ambushed or tracked if he did so. He had to be sure about the army camp situation as a whole before anything else. Furthermore, there was a more important place he had to find. Hui Yuhao could only use his spiritual avatar to walk briskly around the army camp because he couldn't use spiritual detection, though he could walk around very freely and casually because of imitation. The Sun Moon Empire's army camp undoubtedly had all kinds of surveillance soul tools, but these surveillance soul tools were directed outwards, not inwards. Who would be so bored as to investigate their own soldiers' situation? The reason why Hui Yuhao made his spiritual avatar so small was both to conserve spiritual power and also because a small body was harder for the surveillance soul tools to detect. Hui Yuhao moved very quickly, and he went almost one full round around the army camp before he quietly returned to his own tent. His spiritual avatar returned to his original body, and everything returned to normal. Hui Yuhao's eyes opened again, and the masquerade dolor's expression became extremely solemn. Hui Yuhao could see a lot more clearly after investigating at such close proximity. The Sun Moon Empire's layout was seamless and almost entirely impenetrable. There were many soldiers guarding their 5 soul tool fronts. There were no surveillance soul tools pointed inwards in the army camp's other places, but there were some around the 5 soul tool fronts. Everybody who came near had to be interrogated. Hu Hao didn't dare to let his spiritual avatar go close to those soul tool fronts. Furthermore, he could feel that there were link formations which were continuously activated within those fronts. Even though he wasn't sure that they were doing, he had no doubt that they possessed formidable defensive or offensive capabilities. One misstep and he would be discovered, and become cannon fodder. Hu Hao had originally hoped to find one of the Sun Moon Empire storage soul tools, or a warehouse that housed stationary soul cannon shells, which he could detonate at the appropriate time. He would create much chaos in the army camp if that happened, and cooperating with the Heavenly Soul Empire when the time came would be most effective. But it seemed like he had to change his plan, because he couldn't find any warehouses that stored soul tools. There was no question that these warehouses were contained within those soul tool fronts, which meant that he would have to break through the soul tool front's defenses if he wanted to bomb those warehouses. Not even Elder Song could do that even if she was here, not to mention Hu Hao. What should I do? Hu Hao's eyes squinted as he contemplated long and hard. This was very important for him, because insufficient chaos wouldn't give them sufficient time. The night was peaceful, and everything seemed to return to tranquility. The Sun Moon Empire increased their ground-based aerial surveillance, but they didn't discover anything. The Heavenly Soul Empire also seemed particularly calm and quiet. The Holy Ghost Church's evil soul masters discovered that, over the past 2 days, their 7th elder had become particularly hardworking. He didn't touch any girls, and he remained in his tent to cultivate effortfully. He was almost not seen at all in the day. Dinner on the second night. Hu Hao deliberately called Nangong Wan before eating dinner, and they walked towards the evil soul master's canteen together. Third elder, can you find an empty and remote place for me? It would be better if this place wasn't inside this core area, and best if it was near any of the 5 soul tool forts. That place must be quiet and uninhabited. Hu Hao passed a message to Nangong Wan with his mind. Nangong Wan was momentarily stunned. He forced a laugh and said, I'm afraid that's a little difficult. The areas closer to those soul tool fronts are heavily guarded and well equipped with all sorts of surveillance soul tools. It's almost impossible to do something around them without being discovered. Are you guys ready to make your move? A worried expression appeared on his face as he spoke. Hu Hao said plainly, you don't have to worry, third elder. We will give you a way out even when we execute our plan. You have to help me find such a place as fast as possible, and if it really isn't possible, location slightly further away from those soul tool fronts is also acceptable, but it has to be further away from where we are. Only then can we move according to our plan. Nangong Wan knew that he no longer had a choice. He was most afraid of Hu Hao's identity being revealed, because Hu Hao had returned with him as the Masquerade de l'Or. Nangong Wan would also be exposed if Hu Hao was discovered. Alright, I'll try my best. Nangong Wan scurried away after dinner. He was much more familiar with the situation inside the army camp than Hu Hao was. Nangong Wan came to Hu Hao's tent to find him after 2 hours. There's a solution, Tang Wu. Nangong Wan still thought Hu Hao was Tang Wu up until now. Hu Hao frowned and replied, call me Masquerade. Nangong Wan froze for a moment. Alright, Masquerade, I think we have an opportunity, and it's quite a good one at that. The Holy Ghost Church has the authority to supervise and survey the army. The Supreme Leader has just passed the order for us to patrol several soul tool fronts tomorrow afternoon. The 2 fronts that belong to 2 of the hand that protects the nation's 2 soul engineer legions are a little more troublesome because they don't show us much respect. The other 3 fronts that are responsible for defense that belong to normal soul engineer legions are more polite toward us. Why don't we take a trip down together, so you can find an opportunity? Hu Hao was elated when he heard the news. That's fantastic, let's do it then. Tell the Supreme Leader that I will accompany you on patrol tomorrow. Alright, Nangong Wan acknowledged, and he hesitated before he then continued, if you execute your plan tomorrow, what happens to me? Hu Hao answered, don't worry, I'll find an appropriate solution for you. When everything happens, I'll fake my death, and all you have to do is pretend you have no idea about anything. As for the restrictions on your body, we will help you remove them once we fully execute our plan. You're a smart man, and you should understand that something bad will happen to you if you foil our plan. Namgong Wan hurriedly said, of course. Don't worry, as long as you keep your promise to remove my restrictions, I will help you as much as possible even if you look for me again next time. Namgong Wan had taken Huiyuhao, the masquerade Dolor, back together with him, and that meant he had a hold on Namgong Wan. Huiyuhao wasn't at all worried that Namgong Wan would expose him in their operation. As for what would happen afterwards, Huiyuhao didn't consider that too seriously. Who knew how things would unfold? How could Namgong Wan follow his instructions if there wasn't something to threaten him with? But rescuing Tang Wai was of the utmost importance for everyone from Shrek. Huiyuhao immediately sealed his tent with a spiritual barrier once he escorted Namgong Wan away before he swiftly summoned his spectral gate and began to discuss his plan with his companions. The most important component of his plan was executable with Namgong Wan's intel, and the next step was to iron out the rest of the plan perfectly. They would act tomorrow night. Huiyuhao returned to his tent after discussing inside his spectral demiplane for 2 hours. His spiritual barrier was very normal, and it wasn't triggered at all, but Huiyuhao didn't rest. Instead, he conjured another spiritual avatar as he sent it out of his tent, and he followed the path that he had scouted several days ago as he swiftly left the camp and disappeared into the distance. The Sun Moon Empire's surveillance soul tools that pointed outward covered every corner, but not every kind of soul tool could do that task. Huiyuhao found a few loopholes after investigating for 2 days. His spiritual avatar wasn't afraid of thermal detectors, and he also had help from imitation. Huiyuhao evaded the oscillation detectors and spiritual detectors before he slipped out of the camp and went straight for Heaven Do City. His spiritual avatar was carrying the signal soul tool that Princess Wei Na had given him. Huiyuhao's spiritual avatar returned quietly after 2 hours, and it slipped back into the army camp with the same method as it swiftly returned to his tent and integrated back into his body. Preparations were mostly complete, and the next step had to be left until tomorrow. It was late into the night, and Huiyuhao glanced in the direction of Tang Wai's tent before he closed his eyes and began to meditate. He had to maintain his peak spiritual condition for tomorrow's operation. Huiyuhao got up very early in the morning, and cultivated his purple demon eyes before he proceeded towards the canteen. He was walking when he suddenly sensed something, and subconsciously turned to look back, and he saw Tang Wai, who was calmly walking in the same direction. Huiyuhao had seen Tang Wai a few times over the past 2 days, but Tang Wai almost never spoke with anyone. She was like a statue, or rather, she was like the walking dead. But Huiyuhao could be sure that Tang Wai hadn't completely lost her consciousness. Otherwise, what use would this holy lady be for the Holy Ghost Church to use in the future? The Holy Ghost Church was probably hoping that she and Ma Xiaodao would carry the Holy Ghost Church forward. How would that be possible if they were just puppets? Holy Lady, Huiyuhao stopped and walked over to Tang Wai as he bowed. Hey, Tang Wai nodded, but she still responded as coldly as ever. Just as Huiyuhao thought she would walk past him to eat, Tang Wai suddenly stopped and turned around to face him. She said coldly, "Seventh Elder, your aura seems to have changed. Are you having any problems with cultivation recently?" Eh? Huiyuhao's heart skipped a beat. This was the first time that he had heard Tang Wai speak after coming into this place undercover. Tang Wai's voice wasn't very different from back then, but her voice no longer had any emotions, like she was just a machine talking. "Holy Lady, what kind of changes are you talking about?" Huiyuhao's mind was very stable. He wasn't caught off guard by the sudden change in circumstances, and he asked her a question instead with a smile on his face. Tang Wai seemed taken aback as she frowned and said, "I can't quite put a finger on it. I just find that your aura has become more intimate than before, like there's more familiarity. You're not as despicable as before." Tang Wai didn't attempt to mask her feelings when she said that she despised the masquerade Dolor. That surprised Huiyuhao, because even though Tang Wai was the holy lady, she was just a soul Dolor. She wasn't polite at all to this elder. Blue Silver. An elderly voice could be heard at this moment. Hui Yuhao felt his entire body tense up when he heard this voice, and he hurriedly took a few steps back as he spoke respectfully to where this voice was coming from. Greetings, Supreme Leader. Didn't that old voice belong to the Holy Ghost Church's Supreme Leader, Zhongli Wu? Tang Wei wasn't as reverent as Hui Yuhao was. Instead, she simply bowed faintly as a gesture in Zhongli Wu's direction. Zhongli Wu came beside Tang Wei and removed the hood on his head. This was the first time that Hui Yuhao got a look at the Holy Ghost Church's Supreme Leader at such close proximity. Zhongli Wu's hair was short and silver, and his hair was very thin and dense, and very sharp and tough, like steel needles. His eyebrows were thick, his eyes were bright, and he was actually extremely handsome. His eyes were dark purple, and faintly exuded a deep and profound aura. Nobody could feel his aura as an evil soul master just by looking at his physical appearance. He looked very young, and if not for his silver hair, he would have passed a middle-aged man. But Hui Yuhao knew that Zhongli Wu was only one generation younger than his teacher, Mu Yen, and the death god Doluo, Yi Shishui. He was probably more than 180 years old, yet he still looked very young. I didn't say much, Tang Wei responded coldly to Zhongli Wu's doubts, and Hui Yuhao heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Zhongli Wu smiled faintly and said, "Are you still hating on Seventh Elder? He didn't mean to scare you back then. I didn't expect you hold grudges. I've already instructed him not to unleash his demonic maggot in front of you, no matter what, so you don't have to worry. Come, let's eat." Zhongli Wu immediately grabbed Tang Wei's hand as he spoke, and they walked towards the canteen. Eh? Hui Yuhao felt a little strange when he witnessed how intimate Zhongli Wu was with Tang Wei. Can it be that Zhongli Wu is pining after teacher Xiao Wei? But he's already 180 years old. Hui Yuhao watched Zhongli Wu and Tang Wei walk towards the canteen, and he could only grit his teeth and follow at the back to prevent any suspicion. Zhongli Wu suddenly stopped walking at this moment. Hui Yuhao felt his heart skip a beat. Has he discovered something? Zhongli Wu turned around to look at Hui Yuhao and said, "Masquerade, you cannot come along. The blue-silver holy lady doesn't have much of an appetite with you around. Go back and have your meal later." Hui Yuhao was overjoyed when he heard those words, and he bowed respectfully toward Zhongli Wu like a great burden had been lifted from his chest before he turned to leave. "Who wants to eat with you guys?" Hui Yuhao swiftly returned to his tent, and exhaled deeply once he stepped in. That was so close. Teacher Xiao Wei seems to have discovered something. Fortunately, she seems a little dense and inarticulate, and she didn't bring it up to Zhongli Wu. For Hui Yuhao, the safest choice would be to run away as quickly as possible so that he could prevent any unforeseen dangers. But could he really leave? Everything that he had prepared and worked for would be wasted if he did. I can't leave, so I'm going to take a chance. I have to bet that teacher Xiao Wei hasn't recognized me, and she hasn't mentioned anything to Zhongli Wu. Hui Yuhao couldn't help but feel a little nervous as his thoughts stopped there. Everything that he had worked for would be wasted if he was discovered now, and he would also find himself trapped in dire danger. This video will end here.